Thank you for joining us for our Get the Scoop ILEARN English Language Arts Assessment Training. We are excited to share changes that are coming to statewide assessments in Indiana. We will discuss 5 important topics within this training. First, we will look at ILEARN as a summative assessment. Then we will share some key ideas about computer adaptive testing and the new items and rubrics for ILEARN assessments. And finally, we will end with changes in accessibility and test administration. Let's begin by taking a moment to reflect on summative assessment. Not all assessments are created equal. The purpose of an assessment drives how it is created and how we should view and use its data. There are 4 main types of assessment: formative, interim, summative, and diagnostic. Each type of assessment has a different purpose and therefore is constructed differently and should be interpreted differently. Formative assessments measure student knowledge and skills during learning so that instruction can be adjusted to target specific needs. Teachers use formative strategies such as questioning, exit tickets, and rich tasks daily in the classroom to help move student learning forward. Interim or benchmark assessments monitor student progress over time. These may at times be placed into the formative or summative buckets depending on how the data may be used. Summative assessments take place at the end of learning to provide evidence or measurement of what learning has occurred over a given period of time. Diagnostic assessments diagnose specific student needs for a certain skill set. For example, a reading diagnostic may break down essential reading skills and then identify which of those skills a student lacks, which is causing him or her to be unsuccessful in reading. All types of assessments provide data needed to make informed educational decisions. However, we would not look at the data from each of these assessments in the same way. ILEARN is a summative assessment, or an assessment of learning at the end of instruction. Summative assessments document the achievement or mastery of academic standards at any given point of time. These assessments provide large-scale data regarding program successes and challenges. This is different from formative assessments that are designed to inform teaching in the moment. Summative data is typically used to inform decision-making on a large scale, such as identifying strengths and weaknesses in instructional or educational programming. Did my class or my school have overall strong achievement in math process standards? Which schools in my district are doing well in writing? Perhaps we should share what they are doing. As a teacher, I might look at standard level data to determine what standards the majority of my students did well on, so I probably have a great system for teaching those standards, and what standards they struggled with, so maybe I want to target PD for instructional strategies for those standards. Summative data may also be used as certification that standards have been mastered, or as one data point among others to determine program placement for students, or to flag students who may need additional support in order to achieve success. Summative data is not intended to advise teachers and students of next steps in instruction, because the data is not specific enough for this purpose. Next steps are informed by formative assessment data. Summative data may be able to flag areas of student need and to prompt teachers and parents to look more carefully at a given area, but the data cannot provide next steps of instruction. Computer adaptive testing is new for Indiana when it comes to our statewide assessment. Let's discuss how the computer adaptive or CAT algorithm functions, as well as the key roles that are played by item rigor and difficulty. Computer adaptive assessments were first built to meet an identified need, the need for more precise data about what students know and can do. Fixed form assessments tend to only measure student ability close to the average ability level because all students see the same test questions. Therefore, the range of difficulty does not venture much into too easy or too hard for the average student, creating a floor and a ceiling on what knowledge and skills are measured. Computer adaptive assessments overcame this difficulty by creating a way to individualize assessment difficulty while still measuring the same content for all students on the basis of a test blueprint. What this means is that a computer adaptive test can measure more accurately what knowledge and skills a student has while still focusing on content priorities defined by a blueprint. This slide shows a visual diagram of how students could potentially move through the adaptive assessment. The left axis represents item difficulty. More difficult items are higher on the scale than the easier items. The bottom axis represents the question number, so as you look from left to right, you can visualize how a student encounters different item difficulty as he or she moves through the test. You can see that all 3 students enter at a medium difficulty level. From there, the algorithm begins to adapt the difficulty of items based on performance. If they answer correctly, they proceed to more difficult questions, and if they answer incorrectly, they move to easier questions. Student 1 continued to answer correctly until item 4. Item 4 was answered incorrectly, and the student received an easier question for item 5. Question 5 was also answered incorrectly, so the student received a slightly easier item for question 6. And then question 6 was answered correctly, and you can see the difficulty level raise for item 7. With each student, difficulty seems to level out after the first 8 items. While this is not true across the board, the algorithm is typically able to identify average student performance levels around this point in the assessment, using the rest of the assessment to fine-tune. To best understand computer adaptive testing, it is important to know the difference between cognitive complexity, or the rigor required by a task, and item difficulty. These 2 concepts, although sometimes related, refer to different ideas. I will hand the presentation over to Erin Thompson, our English Language Arts specialist, to guide us through this topic.
Cognitive complexity is a measure of the demand of thought processes required to complete a task. Bloom's taxonomy is one system that measures cognitive complexity by placing tasks into categories such as remembering and understanding, low-rigor tasks, versus evaluating and creating, high-level tasks. Webb's depth of knowledge, or DOK, is another system that measures cognitive complexity. Tasks that only require recall or reproduction of information are low rigor, while those requiring strategic thinking are high rigor. DOK is the cognitive complexity measurement used for the ILEARN assessments. Notice that cognitive complexity is always defined by the task that has been given. Whether a student finds the task to be easy or hard, the cognitive processes required to complete that task do not change. Difficulty is a measure of how hard or easy an item is based on how students perform on that item. This is a statistical measure that may at times be related to the task given, but is not defined by the task. Many different factors influence item difficulty, including the familiarity of the test subject matter under discussion, linguistic complexity, numeric complexity, or the requirement of perseverance. While cognitive complexity and difficulty are at times related, they are not dependent upon one another. DOK may remain the same while item difficulty changes. Conversely, higher levels of rigor might include easy items, while lower levels of rigor might include hard items. Note that the ILEARN cognitive complexity remains stable for all students based on the rigor of the standard being assessed, while difficulty changes for students based on their previous performance on test items. Let's take a look at a few examples. The sample item for DOK1 asks students to refer to an explicit detail from the text. The sample for DOK2 goes beyond recall and requires the student to comprehend the text in order to determine the main problem. The student may have to make a distinction from other problems the character faces to determine the main one. The sample for DOK3 requires the student to understand the author's perspective or position on an idea in order to identify a statement that the author would likely agree with. Identifying an explicit detail, comprehending an idea in a text, and making connections between ideas can all be easy or more difficult depending on factors like complexity of text or content. Item difficulty is determined by data collected for each item as it's field tested. That includes the percentage of students who answered an item correctly. The lower the number of students getting an item correct indicates a higher difficulty, while a higher number of correct responses indicates a lower difficulty. We also look at a student's performance on an item in relation to their performance on the rest of the assessment. This helps determine how well the item differentiates skill level. You can see two items displayed here. One that's easy, where 91% of students answered correctly, and one that's more difficult, where only 29% of students answered correctly. Now let's take a look at some of the new items that will be on the assessment and go over our updated rubrics for open-ended items. The ELA performance task for ILEARN is designed to simulate a more authentic classroom activity in which students collect information about a topic they will then write about. Students read multiple sources, answer questions about these sources, and then use that research to support their writing. The writing is aligned to the grade level standards for W3-1, persuasive writing at grades 3 through 5, and argumentative at grades 6 through 8. W3-2, informative writing, or W3-3, narrative writing. Samples of performance tasks can be found in our released items repository. Writing in response to text has been the expectation for the statewide assessment since Indiana adopted the 2014 Indiana Academic Standards. This comes from the learning outcome for writing that requires students to apply reading standards to support analysis, reflection, and research by drawing evidence from literature and nonfiction texts. For ILEARN, students will be doing text-based writing, but the role of the sources is as research for writing. This is why many of the texts are nonfiction. However, it is noted in the item specifications that literary sources may also be occasionally used when it fits the task. In this 6th grade example of a narrative performance task located in the released items repository, students are told they will be writing a short story about hiking in Grand Canyon National Park. They will read 4 sources about the Grand Canyon and hiking before answering some questions about them. After they answer these questions, they will write their short story. As students read the passages, they can highlight details and make notes in the global notes. These highlights and notes are static, meaning they will remain visible with all of the items. This is an example of a constructed response question leading up to the narrative writing. Students are asked to determine the most relevant source for researching how to get the most enjoyment out of hiking in a national park. They are then asked to support the answer with evidence. Other items may ask students to look at multiple sources to determine where they would find certain pieces of information. Once students have read the passages and answered the questions, they will be ready to begin writing. They are provided more specific information about the writing task, including the purpose of their writing and their audience. They are also provided information about how their writing will be scored. Students will be able to plan their writing on their own paper. The final draft will go in the response space students are provided. All ILEARN text boxes will support up to 20,000 characters. Some word processing tools and spell check are also available. iStep had 2 rubrics that totaled 10 points for the whole prompt. The ILEARN rubrics work a little differently. First, rubrics are genre-specific, depending on the type of writing students are being asked to do. Writing traits are split into 2 4-point rubrics, one rubric for organization, purpose, and one for evidence or development elaboration. Scores for these 2 rubrics are averaged together for one 4-point score. There's also a 2-point conventions rubric that makes 6 total points for the writing. The performance task writing prompt and 2-point constructed response questions utilize different task models. Task models are different ways of setting up questions, and they're described in the item specifications. Scoring is specific to those tasks. Generally, if a constructed response provides adequate explanation and evidence, it earns a score point of 2. If a response has only a limited or partial explanation and evidence, it earns a 1. No points are awarded for insufficient, incorrect, or irrelevant explanations. More specific rubric information will be posted by October 1st. Speaking and listening standards are represented on the ILEARN assessment through 2 standards at each grade level. These standards are not part of a reporting category, but will be aggregated into the overall scale score. Examples of items aligned to the speaking and listening standards can be found in the released items repository. For this 5th grade example, students listen to a short stimulus about asteroids and then answer questions about the stimulus. Earbuds or headphones are necessary for these items. Schools might want to add this item to their back-to-school lists for families or ask their PTOs to help ensure that students have these ready for the test. Generic earbuds or headphones are acceptable so long as they're compatible with the student device. ASL is provided on listening items for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. There are a few other items, like those aligned to media literacy or standards like 6RL 41, compare and contrast the experience of reading a story, play, or poem with listening to or viewing an audio, video, or live version of a text, including contrasting what they see and hear when reading the text and what they perceive when they listen or watch, that require use of earbuds or headphones. For grade 3 only, 4 reading foundation standards will now be assessed on ILEARN. These foundational standards are shown in aggregate reporting only on the ILEARN blueprints. There may be a maximum of 2 items assessed for these reading foundation standards as indicated on the blueprints in the reported category item range column. A change for English Language Arts assessment with ILEARN at grades 6 through 8 is the inclusion of content area literacy standards. These can be seen incorporated into the ELA ILEARN blueprints. In order to reach the expectation from the USED that we assess the breadth and depth of our standards, the content area literacy standards are part of the ILEARN assessment. They are assessed with the ELA standards because of the closely related skills. These related skills are grouped together with the overarching reading nonfiction standard on the ILEARN blueprints with an indicated standard item range and percentage of the test. This is done with intent because of how closely the standards are aligned and to be mindful of the overall test length. Passages used for ILEARN encompass many genres, including memoirs, articles, excerpts from books, and speeches. These will also include some historic and scientific technical texts. Some of the questions about these texts will be aligned to the content area literacy standards. Questions will not assess content knowledge, but will assess reading comprehension skills of the content area text. The new ILEARN blueprints replace the previous classroom guidance of critical standards, or standards being check, check plus, or not assessed. Now we can use these more detailed blueprints to identify the priority of standards, which was determined by an educator committee, while also remembering that all standards are important and may be included on the statewide assessment. Let's walk through an example of how we might interpret these numbers. First, take a look at standard RL 21 for grade 7. The minimum number of items per test form is 1 and the maximum is 3. This means all students will definitely see at least 1 item measuring this standard every year, and may receive as many as 3. Moving to standard RL 2.3, students might not receive any items measuring the standard at all, or they could receive up to 2. This standard is considered a medium priority. Towards the bottom of the blueprint is RV 2.2. This standard's lesser priority is reflected in the fact that the student might receive only 1 or no items measuring this skill. This is how item priority is reflected through the minimum and maximum number of questions provided for each standard.
Test blueprints are only one piece of test construction. Item specifications and performance level descriptors, or PLDs, also play an important role. Item specifications are discussed in a separate training, but let's spend some time now talking through the new ILEARN PLDs. Educator committees first create policy PLDs, or statements that define the overarching expectations for specific performance levels. Policy PLDs are then used to create range PLDs. Range PLDs take achievement expectations and apply them to each specific academic standard, showing what students need to achieve in order to obtain each performance level. These PLDs are then used to create items that will measure student achievement at different levels and in different ways. PLDs are not just part of the assessment development process. They also help us make sense of student scores. After students take the assessment, they receive a scale score. Scale scores describe a student's achievement of a set of standards as a whole. Meaning is attached to these scale scores through the performance level descriptors. Range PLDs can also help teachers, students, and parents understand what they need to know and achieve in order to reach different proficiency levels. The standard level descriptions of different levels of achievement may provide additional guidance on how students can achieve higher levels of proficiency. This screen shows the new ILEARN policy PLDs. Notice that we now have 4 proficiency levels where our previous assessment had only 3. The new performance levels are below proficiency, approaching proficiency, at proficiency, and above proficiency. Remember, these are broad statements that describe achievement. They will be applied specifically to grade level content in the range PLDs. Let's take a moment to consider the similarities and differences between these performance levels. Notice that each PLD describes how well the student has met grade level standards. Below proficiency students have not met the standards, approaching have nearly met, and at proficient students have met grade level standards. Students above proficiency have not only met, but also mastered grade level standards. Each category also references the level of knowledge, application, and analytical skills that have been demonstrated on the assessment. Performance levels also track college and career readiness. Remember, PLDs can be used to understand a student's overall achievement on grade level standards. It is very important for any assessment to accurately measure what a student knows and can do. Accessibility is a key part of accurate measurement. We want all students to be able to access the test in a way that allows them to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. As we develop ILEARN, accessibility considerations are a priority. One aspect of accessibility considerations is tools or supports that can be provided to students during testing to assist them in accessing the assessment. IDOE has taken these tools and supports and created a framework to describe what supports are available and how they can be used. This is the ILEARN Accessibility Framework. You can see that tools and supports are divided into 3 main groups. Universal features are available to all students. Designated features are available to any student with a need as determined by the teacher or school leaders. And accommodations, which are available only to students with special plans. Embedded features are those that are provided within the online test platform. Non-embedded features cannot be provided via the platform and must be handled by the local school. Notice that several of these features are new for ILEARN. Let's take a moment to discuss some new features so that we understand how they might be used as supports. 4 new universal features are specific to the English Language Arts writing task. These are the dictionary, thesaurus, spell check, and rich text tools. All students will receive all of these features for the writing task only. You can see screenshots of the dictionary and thesaurus tools on the right side of the screen. The rich text toolbar is shown at the bottom of the screen. Bold, italicized, underlined, and subscripted text are all available along with paragraph indentations. Cut, copy, and paste can be used via the toolbar, but not from the keyboard shortcuts as a test security feature. The undo and redo buttons can access several saved versions to restore student work as needed. The spell check option is highlighted in the red box. Note that spell check does not automatically change any word to suggested spellings, as may occur in some word processing programs. Students must actively choose to update the spelling of a word from the provided list to make a change. The option on the far right is the special characters symbol and allows students to choose from a limited quantity of characters that may not appear on the keyboard. You can further explore these tools on our released items repository. 3 universal features are new for all subject areas. The notepad allows students to take notes or jot down ideas as needed. The item tutorial is a feature that provides help on how to answer different item types in case a student is unsure of what to do. Item tutorials are specific to each item type. Glossaries are a new feature that specifically targets accessibility. For all subject areas, content experts have identified words that all students might not know or understand, especially English language learners. These words display on the screen with a slight blue outline. When students select the word, a glossary definition appears as is shown on the screen. It is important to note that construct-relevant words, or those words that students should know based on the standard that's being assessed, are never glossed. Construct-relevant vocabulary for each academic standard is included in our item specifications. There are a few new designated features that I would also like to highlight. Translated glossaries are now available in mathematics, science, and social studies, as well as Spanish translations of test content. Translated glossaries work just like the English glossary available to all, but provide definitions in the additional language. Translated glossaries also provide audio versions of the word definition. Spanish translations are available to those identified with the need as well. These translations are stacked with the Spanish stem at the top of the screen and the English stem below it, as shown in the screenshot. Answer choices are also displayed in both English and Spanish. If you would like to learn more about additional accessibility features and student accommodations, please consider attending our Get the Scoop ILEARN Accessibility and Accommodations training. As we prepare to wrap up, let's discuss a few important changes to note with upcoming test administration. We are excited about improvements being made in test timing. With ILEARN, there will no longer be two separate test windows, Part 1 and Part 2. Rather, there will be a single test window at the end of the school year. Students will experience a reduction of 1 to 2 hours of testing time per student on average. Assessment timing will be changing as well due to the computer adaptive nature of these tests. Students will be provided with unique test experiences based on how they perform on different items. Although all students will receive the same number of items for ILEARN, the difficulty of these items will vary by student. To accommodate this, ILEARN assessments will not be timed, allowing students to work through the content at their own pace. Additional guidance regarding what this might look like and suggestions for scheduling will be provided on October 1. I would also note that moving to untimed assessments can help to alleviate some concerns regarding younger students typing their responses for the writing prompt, as students will be able to take the time that they need to respond. Test administration will look a bit different with the new assessment. Test tickets and seal codes will no longer be needed. The test administrator, either at the classroom, grade, or school level as would be locally defined, will create and start test sessions via the online system. This new test administrator dashboard also allows the test administrator to monitor student progress as they work through the test. Those who will use the online system to start and administer tests must complete the required online test administrator certification course, which walks you through how to start and stop test sessions and how to use those different tools that are available to test administrators. This training will be ready to go in the next few months. Scoring also brings us some exciting new changes. You need ILEARN data to be evidence-based and actionable, and we are working hard to meet that need. Individual student results will continue to provide a scale score and subscores for reporting categories. Lexile and quantile scores will also be provided. These scores define student achievement in reading and mathematics on a vertical scale that spans all grade levels. They also provide additional data regarding what students know and can do. For computer adaptive tests, standard level reporting will be available for aggregate level reports or classroom, grade level school data to assist teachers and administrators in identifying strengths and weaknesses in curriculum and instruction. Also beginning spring 2019, Indiana educators are invited to be a part of the scoring process for open-ended items. If you are interested in participating, watch for additional information to come through Dr. McCormick's weekly email. While we will not be able to provide student results in 2019 until after we complete standard setting in the summer, for all subsequent years, results for ILEARN will be provided within 12 days of students taking the assessment. This means that if a student completes an assessment during the first week of the test window, he will actually receive his results prior to the end of the test window. For iRead 3, results will populate within 24 hours beginning spring 2019. If you have any questions regarding the new assessment, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We are happy to help and support you in whatever ways we can. Thank you for joining us today.